What I found was very interesting is the UI. If you look at it, and we'll be showing some examples, but when you start to see what it is that they're doing with the rocket, it's really interesting to see the UI as the rocket is launching.
With more than 25 years of experience building software products, we know the difficulties of creating the apps you use every day. This show seeks to evaluate and build up popular tools used by many by offering our critique of the design and user experience and add our suggestions on how to improve. These are our personal opinions. We are not affiliated with any of these companies whose product we review, and we run this program on our own behalf. Our goal is to examine products for educational and entertainment purposes. So today we have Alejandro and Lino again. How are you doing, guys?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing well.
I'm doing great.
Thank you.
Great. So what are we going to talk about today?
So today, a slight shift, because instead of talking about a tool specifically, I want to talk about something that was recently in the news, which is the SpaceX, the 6th flight test mission that they did with Starship recently. And it's something that's been on my mind for a while. And once I saw it again, though sadly, the rocket wasn't caught this time, it's still something that I was looking at while I was going live. And I wanted to bring it up because it's very interesting to see how UI can bring a lot of information. And it actually brought to light, as we were having an internal discussion, that there's a lot of live services, live things that provide UIs for, let's call it, spectators. So Formula One racing, in racing you see the positions, you see how people are shifting around, how someone's fighting for position, they're climbing up the ranks, or you're seeing when someone's disqualified. When things happen, the same things in sports, certain call outs, certain things. The famous basketball shot clock, everyone sees it all the time if you're in the stadium, but you only see it appear on the TV when there's a few seconds left. Those kinds of things that give you critical information. Right. Something that I notice is the way SpaceX is doing it is not something that we've seen in other places because they have a lot of extra data. And so in this case, instead of being more of a critique, I sort of wanted to talk in a more positive light of what it is that they're providing. Because if you look at, launch video, they have a lot of data, and at first it's very minimal. When you see the stream before the rocket starting, you're just seeing a video of the rocket fueling up. Sometimes you don't understand exactly what's happening. I actually only recently learned that they're using liquid oxygen, which is a much cheaper fuel, but it's also very hard to get into the rocket because you have to cool down you need very cold temperatures to be able to get it to work. Right. And it finally dawned on me, a lot of times you see rockets flying off and you see like little things falling off and all this kinds of things because, I hadn't followed, rockets that much. It hadn't really been a big thing. When I was little, there was the space shuttles, and then they stopped that program. And now you only hear about rockets going up once or twice for satellites or other things, but it's not had as much interest as it does now. And so I was learning about, what is that stuff that seems to fall off the rocket as it's going up? And I was like, it's actually, if you've ever used compressed air to clean out your laptop or hardware or that kind of thing, you know how it starts to get really cold. And so something similar is happening with the rocket. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but my hand actually, it feels like it's going to freeze or stick to the can when you're using too much compressed air because it starts to really, really get cold. And so the rocket's similar thing. It's being cooled so much that there's ice forming on the outside. And so not just right. When you have a cold cup, you see it sweating, right? Because it's water condensing on it. Well, this gets to the point where it's freezing. It's not just condensing, but it's freezing on the rocket. So when you see all that wet stuff fall off, it's actually ice. And you actually see it. If you see the rocket taking off, as it's going up, you start to see that stuff fall off. And then once it gets to a certain height, there's nothing else that's falling anymore because all the ice is basically off. And so back on the topic of SpaceX, what I found was very interesting is the UI. If you look at it, and we'll be showing some examples, but when you start to see what it is that they're doing with the rocket, it's really interesting to see the UI as the rocket is launching. You see the flight test time, you see when it's counting down, once the actual rocket starts, and then on the left side, for example, you start to see all those little circles are representing each of the rockets, because this isn't just like some mega rocket that they're installing. They actually use a lot of different rockets, which brings up other interesting scenarios of even one or two, they can fall they can fail, and the rocket can still kind of correct itself. So it's interesting to see all the things light up. You can see the LOX, which is the liquid oxygen. You can see that, start to burn up as the rocket is going. You can actually see it's interesting because it's going at a pretty decent clip. So it's not going super slow. It's actually going kind of fast. And you're like, oh, okay, it's really burning through that stuff. And you can see the speed, you can see the altitude, you even see the rocket orientation, which is interesting because sometimes you wonder, like, is it shooting straight up, or is it, does it go at an angle, how far of an angle, etc. And then on the right side, if you look later, once the rocket fuel is about to run out, you notice that we have what they call the separation. So then the main rocket, which is the part that was caught the previous launch, with the called chopsticks, that separates, that starts heading back towards the Earth. And then the top part, the rocket, let's call it, which has the payload, it could be, in the future, it could be people, can be satellites, etc., flies off. And then on the right side, you see other circles which represent the rockets that one has. And so you see the same thing happening, right? Like now you see the UI of the fuel for that one burning up. On the left side, you kind of see like it almost looks disabled, but you see the rocket like no longer is on. You see the rockets on the left side are still on, so it's still straightened itself out, which is interesting because what it's doing on the left side is it's trying to slow itself down so that it doesn't burn up as fast for reentry. So there's a lot of interesting things happening, and the video is usually trying to show you what is happening at what point. And depending on the stream, if you see it live from SpaceX, they're the ones controlling it. But sometimes they show you like a split screen, so you can kind of see, okay, this thing is happening to the main rocket, this thing is happening to something else. In this case, you can also see a split screen of they put more cameras this time. And the interesting thing is they're using Starlink to, give you live feeds, which we couldn't do before. And so you're seeing different things happening. And so they're using the camera. Obviously, if you're listening to the narration, they're telling you what it is that you're seeing, what's happening. But this is interesting because you have all these camera angles, you have all this information, which is back to the point of UI. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of data. And the thing that I really would like to praise the SpaceX team on is that they kept it very minimal, but it's very interesting data. So it's very interesting to see the rockets burning up that fuel, to see which rockets are on, when it's off. And same thing on the right side, because something that comes up later during the reentry sequence is when you see the video of the rocket falling, you start to see the rockets on the bottom of the heavy one, the big tube. They start to look red. So you would assume that the rockets are on and maybe they're slowing things down. But actually what is happening is they're just heating up from reentry. So you're seeing the rockets, they look like they're on, but they're just super hot because, they're literally burning up as you're going down. And so it's interesting to see that. You see the rockets are off in the UI, but they look on just by visually seeing it. So it's actually giving you information of like, oh, okay, they're not on yet. And now you see like the rockets then blast on and start to slow it down. So there's a lot of interesting things happening, and there's a lot of interesting UI, but it's just giving you the minimum information that you need. There's, I'm sure, a lot of more data that SpaceX could throw at you, a lot of telemetry, a lot of extra things, but they're just giving you what you need. As a spectator, that's the interesting stuff, right? Like you can see the inclination, like now it's falling into the ocean, the speed that it has, all those things. It's interesting information, but it's also relevant to what you're seeing. You could see GPS tracking and coordinates and all those other things, but right now, this is what you really need. The rocket, like for example, here you can see on the right side, the rocket is speeding up. The speed is actually something that I didn't notice until later. Is like that thing hasn't slowed down at all. Like it just keeps going, and so the speed is going super fast. The altitude keeps climbing. Obviously, it's gonna eventually go back down and try to land. But it's interesting to see just how fast it goes, just how high, just how long the rockets are on, and then once it hits reentry, then there's a whole extra video showing you the reentry sequence. The video, you actually see it burning up, heating up. And so all of this is very interesting information. But again, it's a nice combination of the visuals and showing you a minimal UI to keep you on track of like what is happening to the ship, and you don't lose focus. And that's something that I think we could, and actually we're planning on looking at in a future episode of specific examples of where we can prepare. For example, we've been thinking about sports, which is a future topic. But for example, the UI for this Starship kind of reminds me of a video game, which we'll talk about a related one in a bit. But there's a lot of UIs that now seem to replicate games, and a lot of these UIs have been in video games like for ages. Like if you start looking at baseball now, they show you like a square of where the ball is landing, where the strike zone is, and all those kinds of things. So it's interesting to see this merging of technology now enables to do things that before were like video gamey, and now there's actually providing interesting information. So just to pause here, because I've been talking for a while, Federico, or I'll start with Alejandro, because Alejandro, I know you know a lot less about all this rocket stuff. You can tell who's kind of like the nerd about this stuff here, but just wanted to get your feeling about what you think of the UI, because again, this is something that to me is interesting, and I'm sure we could find things to improve in the future. But just as a first pass, I think this is a very good, proposal by and what they're using for Starship.
Yeah, I really do think that explaining the users like me that don't know a lot of the subject with such a minimal UI is such a great accomplishment by SpaceX, because it does let me know what's happening with little elements, and it's really simple things, but as it explains to users like me what's going on the, and making these explanations with this content live, it really helps the users understand what's going on, and I really do think that it makes the experience better. So yeah, I really appreciate these minimal UIs that explain users without being too cluttered, because sometimes they do seem to want to show the user a lot of information, but most of the users don't understand what's going on. So it's just a clutter of information for most users. And in this one, you can tell what's going on without having a lot of information.
So one other thing that I thought was really interesting about all this is the fact that we have this interactivity, and I was wondering why we don't have it in other live feeds. Like we were talking about, we have some fans internally in our team about Formula One racing and a lot of other things, esports and so many other things. There's a lot of data that's available, but a lot of times it's not surfaced, and I was wondering why not. And I just came to the realization that, for example, Starship, SpaceX, all of that, they have a lot of data because all their systems are digital. They were made that way. They're new systems, so there's a lot of data that you can just connect to and pull through. Just like with Tesla and all, and their cars are all electric. So of course you could pull in all this data. So if you were racing Tesla electric cars, I'm pretty sure you could have very interesting UIs as well, because you can have all the live data of the charge, the power, the et cetera, all these other things. Whereas with Formula One racing, normally you don't get that data. I'm sure there might be access to that data in some way, but they haven't really pushed it forth, which is why I wanted to bring this topic forth as well, because this can provide a very interesting way to get more people excited about certain things. Whether it's spectator sports, whether it's this kind of live feeds of advancing human civilization, other things. It's just very interesting that you can have all this data that we didn't have access to before. Because if you think of old races in NASCAR and all that stuff, the only person that knows how much fuel is left is the driver, and if he's radioing the team. But that's a closed system, so there was no way to have access to that data. Whereas now we can be connected to all those things and have that live data, like I was showing in the SpaceX video. You can see even the tilt. You can see how many rockets are on, which ones are on, the fuel amount, all of that. And again, going back to that analogy of it's video gamey, because video games, you need that data for a game, right? If you're about to run out of fuel, you don't want to have a car without fuel in a game, because then you can't do anything and then the fun's over. So it's interesting to see this merger, and this is something that we'll discuss in the future in more topics, and we'll go more in depth and actually be redesigning or be reevaluating some of these systems. It's very interesting to see how this data is coming forth, and just having this access to live data is a lot more interesting, or being able to generate things a lot now with technology. Now we're able to green screen things in, but also just be able to overlay and bring all this extra data. So it's something that I think is very interesting. I think it's something that we'll be looking forward in the future, and I'll be looking forward to seeing how SpaceX evolves, because again, they're iterating all the time. So I'm pretty sure this UI, it's not going to remain static, and as their rockets evolve, they're going to probably be doing the same thing and iterating. Mm-hmm. So Alejandro, just any parting thoughts on this prospect of more live data available?
Yeah, I really do think that this kind of data, the live data on different sports or events, really helps out with engagement with new users or new fans of said sports or or live events to understand like what's going on, because sometimes without a context you really can't understand. Like if I just saw the video of the rocket, I wouldn't be able to understand what's going on, if it's flying or if it's I wouldn't like be able to tell. But with this kind of live UI telling me that it's going through a certain speed and a certain and it's at a certain angle, I do feel that it helps the user understand what's going on more easily. So yeah, I really do appreciate this kind of UIs on this kind of events, because I feel like it helps everyone understand what's going on, and I do feel that it's accomplishing what it was designed for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so again, props to the SpaceX team and all that they've been doing. They've been making, you know, what might seem like a boring rocket launch, because really all you're seeing is just this thing shoot up into space. They made it way more interesting because of that data, because of the way they narrate it, because of the way they explain things. So kudos to them, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to click like and subscribe, and please leave your suggestions in the comments for the next product you'd like to see review, and share this episode. It really helps us a lot, so helps us stay motivated, especially to continue producing quality content for you to enjoy. So thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next one.